Good afternoon to our viewers joining in from around the world. You're watching Arirang News special live coverage of South Korea's 21st presidential election. I'm Song Yujin in Seoul. Now, voters across the country are heading to the polls to choose the country's next leader, one who will steer the country through a time of both challenge and change. So throughout the day, Arirang News will bring you live coverage with everything you need to know about this election. So we're going to begin this hour by checking in at one of the polling stations where voters are casting their ballots today. For that, we go live to our reporter An Sung-jin, who is standing by at one of these stations. So Sung-jin, welcome. And where exactly are you? And tell us the atmosphere at where you are.
Good afternoon, Eugene. I'm currently standing in front of a polling location in Sadangdong in Seoul's Dongjakgu district. It's a little bit past noon right now, and it's been around 6 hours since voting began, starting from this morning at 6 a.m. Now, I've been out here since early hours, and similar to early voting, we've seen a lot of people come in to cast their ballot. The election that takes place today is the first one since the COVID-19 pandemic. In the previous election, masks were necessary, and regular voters were separated from those that were under isolation. The polling station that I'm at currently is one of the 14,295 nationwide and 2,260 from Seoul. We already saw the second highest voter turnout rate for early voting, and many have gathered to vote early this morning as well. Have a listen to some of the voters.
I came to vote to pick someone that can lead our country. Because our country is so polarized and going through a difficult time, we need someone who can bring harmony as a transparent politician.
This is my first vote, so I had to think about who to vote for. Now that I'm done, I'll head to class.
Right, so we can definitely feel the enthusiasm of the voters out there. But Sung-jin, there are still nearly 8 hours left before the polls close tonight. So for those who haven't voted yet, please walk us through the key guidelines and what they should keep in mind before heading out today.
So voting takes place from 6 a.m. till 8 p.m. today, and voters must be over 18 and also bring a government-issued ID. Unlike early voting, regular voters actually should only cast their ballot based on their registered address. Which polling station they can vote at can be found in a voting guide delivered to each household or through the National Election Commission website. Anyone who arrives at the polls and stands in line before the polls has the right to vote. Taking selfies or pictures of the ballots while inside the polling booths is strictly prohibited. That's all I have for now for this glimpse and polling station in the early hours of today, and I will be back later for more. Back to you, Eugene.
Very important things to keep in mind. That was our An Sung-jin live from one of the polling stations in Seoul. Thank you. All right, so once again, it's just past noon here in South Korea. So the question is, how many South Korean voters have already cast their ballot since polls opened? To get the answer to that, we now connect with our reporter Lee at the National Election Commission. Hello there, Uni.
Good afternoon, Eugene.
All right, Uni, so we're still early on election day. 6 hours have passed and we have about 8 hours to go. But how's the turnout looking this afternoon?
Well, Eugene, I'm at the National Election Commission in Gwacheon City, where officials are keeping track of the voter turnout. It's been around 6 hours since the polls opened this morning at 6 a.m. Turnout at 12 p.m. currently is 22.9%, not including figures from early voting. Early voting turnout will be reflected starting with the 1 p.m. update. Figures by region are as of 11 a.m. Daegu, which had recorded the lowest early voter turnout, is now showing the highest turnout rate at 23.1%. The lowest turnout is in Jeollanam-do province, which showed the highest early voter turnout rate at 12.5%. Gwangju is at 13%, while the capital Seoul is seeing a turnout of 17.1%. Incheon is at 18.1%, Busan at 17.7%, and Daejeon stands at 19.4%. Gyeonggi-do province stands at 19%, while Jeollabuk-do province is at 13.2%. In terms of other provinces, turnout in Chungcheongbuk-do is 19.2%, Chungcheongnam-do 19.8%, Gyeongsangbuk-do 21.4%, and Gyeongsangnam-do 19.4%. In this presidential election, early voting was held last week for 2 days, recording a turnout of slightly over 34%, the second highest on record. So far, the hourly voter turnout is slightly higher than in the 2022 presidential election, which ended with a final turnout of 76%. 37.1%.
So we'll have to keep an eye on the final voter turnout. But Uni, once again, the polls will close at 8 p.m. Korea time tonight, and that's when voting counting will then begin. So another big question is, when will the results be known?
Yes, Eugene, once the voting ends at 8 p.m., the ballot boxes will be sealed and moved to the counting centers under police escort. Counting begins soon after, and the National Election Commission expects counting to be finished by 6 a.m. Wednesday morning. The results should become clear by midnight once 70 to 80% of votes are counted. However, of course, final results may take longer depending on voter turnout and how close the race is. Once counting is done, the NEC will hold a full committee meeting in which the new president will be formally declared. This meeting is expected to happen between 7 and 9 a.m. on Wednesday, and the process should only take 5 to 10 minutes. The new president's term will immediately begin. On Monday, Do Tae-ak, chairman of the National Election Commission, urged active voter participation, emphasizing the importance of creating a united South Korea through voting. No assured the public that the NEC has prioritized transparency, highlighting measures such as 24-hour CCTV at early voting stations and a vote paper inspection system, both implemented in last year's general election. Authorities are focusing on safety management as well. The National Fire Agency has launched special emergency operations at over 15,000 polling and counting stations nationwide, running until ballot counting ends. Also this morning at 6 a.m., police declared the highest level of emergency alert, mobilizing all available personnel. This heightened readiness will continue until the new president's inauguration is complete and he arrives at his office on Wednesday. Around 60,000 officers are assigned to polling station security, 45,000 to ballot transport, and 7,000 to counting center protection. That's all I have for now. I'll be back with more updates for our later newscast. Back to you, Eugene.
Please do, Uni. And that was our Uni from the National Election Commission. Thank you. We're now going to head to the situation rooms of the two main parties. We first connect live to our Moon Hae-ryun, who's at the National Assembly members' office building covering the Democratic Party of Korea. Hae-ryun, welcome. And first off, how are things looking over there? Please tell us.
Hello, Eugene. So I'm currently standing in the building's main conference hall, which is where the DP has set up its situation room. And as you can probably tell, it's still relatively quiet here, given that it's still pretty early on in the day. Now, party members have yet to arrive, but they're expected to gather here later this evening. And as you can hopefully see behind me, 2 big screens towards the front of the stage have been set up, and 10 smaller screens on the stage itself, which is how the party and its candidate Lee Jae-myung will be watching the vote count unfold once the polls close at 8 p.m. He will be resting at his home in Gyeong, Incheon, as he has no official schedule for today after finishing up his final rally last night. While nothing has been confirmed as of yet, he's expected to head over here once the voting concludes and the results begin to take shape. Once they do roll in, they will no doubt influence the atmosphere and energy in this room. He was the forerunner in national polls before the blackout for new polls 6 days ago, so expectations are high among party members, hoping to ride that momentum to a win tonight.
Hae-ryun, and you also mentioned that Lee finished up his campaign trail last night, so tell us more about his last campaign activity.
That's right. So as campaign activity is banned on election day itself, last night was Lee's final opportunity to appeal to the public face-to-face. And for his final rally, he returned here to Yeouido, which is where the National Assembly building that I'm standing in right now is located, and is also the symbol of the December 3rd martial law declaration protests.
Tomorrow's vote will decide. End the insurrection or continue it, restore livelihoods or destroy them, grow the economy or wreck it.
So after the rally, he live-streamed on YouTube to make a final appeal. Sitting alone in front of the camera, he told viewers he was still 3 votes short and urged them to help carry him across the finish line. Over the past 22 days, Lee's campaign traveled over 5,000 kilometers, taking him to 66 rallies with 236,000 people on the trail. His last day of campaigning took him across key battlegrounds in this whole metropolitan area, from Gangbuk to Gangseok and finally to Seong Gyeongnam, where he first entered politics. He pledged to order an immediate review of the economic situation should he take office, placing urgent focus on recovering livelihoods. And with all eyes now on tonight's election results and how they will unfold, that's all I have for now, but I'll be back in a later newscast with more updates. Back to you, Yujin.
All right, thank you, Hae-ryun, and keep a close eye on the situation over there for us throughout the day. Thank you. Up next, we now connect with a reporter at the main conservative People Power Party Situation Room. Our Oh Soo-young is there at the National Assembly Library. Welcome, Soo-young. And first, tell us what's the mood like over there and how Kim Moon-soo and the PPP is observing Election Day.
Sure, Jin, it's lovely to see you. Well, here in the People Power Party Situation Room, it is quite early in the day with around 8 hours to go before polls close. So as you can see behind me, there's not much activity here, just a few television screens, about 10 or so blazing behind me. And so the Situation Room here is still quiet as the wait continues. And I would say that the mood within the party and among its supporters as well, there's rather mixed emotions. So there's hope, of course, which springs eternal in any election campaign, but there's also a sense of inevitability and anxiety. Kim Moon-soo's performance in national polls before this whole blackout period 6 days ago, it has been around 10 percentage points behind Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung, and some polls have shown an even wider gap. Still, there's cautious optimism that Kim did his absolute best in the campaign, and there might be a turnaround among the so-called shy conservatives and undecided voters. As per tradition, Kim Moon-soo himself will monitor the voting and the ballot counting process from his home in Gwanak-gu district, southern Seoul. If the vote count indicates that he might be the winner, then he's going to come right here to the Situation Room at the National Assembly Library tonight. Now, key PPP figures will be on standby as well at the party's election headquarters from 7:30 p.m.
Right, so Kim wrapped up his campaign on Monday with quite an ambitious nationwide tour. So tell us a bit more about that too, Soo-young.
Sure, so he was literally pulling out all the stops on his last day of campaigning, beginning from the southern island of Jeju to the capital of Seoul. The 73-year-old candidate promised government reform to meet the demands of a new generation and the electorate, and he also apologized for impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law declaration, which his party has been tainted with ever since it was declared last year. And well, as he stopped by Busan for the third time, the conservative stronghold of Daegu and the central city of Daejeon, Kim lashed out against his Democratic Party rival Lee Jae-myung, warning against his style of dictatorial governance and raised the red flag on Lee's family scandals. Kim stressed that his own wife had never used his corporate card and that his daughter had never publicly uttered vulgar language, as Lee Jae-myung's son allegedly did. Now, stood on stage with his family at Seoul City Hall Square, Kim held his final rally in the Korean capital. The PPP candidate emphasized unity with former rivals from the party primary, including Na Kyung-won, An Chol-soo and Han Dong-un, to prevent what he called a dictatorship under Lee Jae-myung. After failing to achieve a joint conservative ticket with Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok, Kim further called on voters to back him and not Reform's candidate, saying that a split vote would only help the DP's Lee Jae-myung win.
I believe tomorrow will be a great day. It will be the day we stop the bulletproof dictatorship and protect the Republic of Korea, a day when this nation can finally blossom.
Over 22 days of official campaigning, Kim has travelled over 7,300 kilometres to hold 157 events.
I see. Our Oh Soo-young at the People Power Party Situation Room. Thank you. Now, meanwhile, the Reform Party's presidential candidate Lee Jun-seok was down in Busan City this morning, encouraging voters to cast their ballot. He spent the final day of campaigning yesterday, solidifying his support among young voters. At Korea Polytechnic University in Gyeonggi-do Province, Lee joined students for a meal at the school cafeteria, his final lunchtime outreach. He then wrapped up the day in the conservative stronghold of Daegu City at Susong Lake, where he appealed to conservative voters by portraying himself as a new generation leader for the right. Now, regardless of who wins the race, South Korea's next president faces a full agenda, addressing both domestic and international issues that have been put on hold due to months of political uncertainty following last December's martial law declaration. So we'll now examine the key policy visions of the three leading candidates, starting with foreign policy. For that, here's our Kim Jong-sil with the details.
Three frontrunners, three different visions for South Korea's role on the global stage. In their final televised debate, the candidates outlined foreign policy agendas that could reshape the country's position in a region facing rapid change. Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung called for balance between the U.S. alliance and stable ties with China and Russia. He warned of a diplomatic vacuum since the December 3rd martial law unrest and said South Korea's approach must evolve.
The U.S. alliance is the foundation of our foreign policy. It must be developed practically, inclusively, and with a long-term vision. But we must not neglect ties with China and Russia. They require careful, strategic management.
On North Korea, Lee seems to be charting a different course from past progressive leaders favoring step-by-step engagement over demands for immediate denuclearization. Conservative candidate Kim Moon-soo took a harder line, saying diplomacy must be backed by strength.
Kim Jong-un's dictatorship threatens our lives and property with nuclear weapons and missile provocations. I will build a transparent, principled inter-Korean relationship and strengthen our defenses by reinforcing nuclear deterrence through the U.S. alliance.
At the same time, his team told Arirang News he's open to meeting North Korea's leader while supporting economic and cultural engagement as long as it's grounded in South Korea's constitutional principle of one unified nation. At 40, Lee Jun-suk is the youngest candidate in the race. Last week, he laid out his latest foreign policy vision backed by sweeping institutional reform.
The president of South Korea must have international experience and a practical mindset. If elected, I will merge the unification and foreign ministries and appoint a deputy prime minister for national security to oversee foreign affairs, unification and defense policies.
He said South Korea should lead its alliance and not just rely on it. Three visions for South Korea's future on the world stage. By tonight, one of them will begin to shape it. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Now, another top priority for all three frontrunners is revitalizing South Korea's shrinking economy, a pledge that has taken center stage throughout the campaign. For more, our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin breaks down what each candidate is proposing to help get the economy back on its feet.
With economic institutions, both at home and abroad, revising down their growth projections for South Korea, economic pledges are taking center stage in the presidential race.
The domestic economy shrank by 0.2% in the first quarter. Negative growth. How can our people make a living like this? Please elect Lee Jae-myung, a capable, loyal, and well-prepared worker as president.
It's true that Korea is now in a slump with very low growth, among the worst globally, right? I will bring this economy back to life as the president of the economy, everyone.
Half of Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung's pledges focus on the economy, while 7 out of 10 of People Power Party candidate Kim Moon-soo's are economic pledges. And Lee's top economic pledge and Kim's second is artificial intelligence, signaling how both view it as central to Korea's economic growth. Both propose investing 100 trillion won, or around $71 billion into fostering the AI industry, but their plans of how they'll use these funds differ. Lee Jae-myung's AI for All initiative aims to expand public access by offering free advanced AI services, including a Korean version of ChatGPT, while also pledging to secure over 50,000 high-performance GPUs. Kim plans to set up a public-private fund to foster AI unicorns and vows to train 200,000 young specialists through graduate programs and software-focused universities. But both agree that Korea's regulations are outdated, with Lee calling for special exemptions and Kim pushing to align regulations with global standards. Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-suk, currently third in the polls, has proposed market-driven AI innovation with minimal state intervention. And another issue that has garnered much attention is each candidate's bid to improve work-life balance.
Also, he focused on 4.5-day work week is actually aimed at reducing worker fatigue and improving work-life balance. If you look at the Kim Moon-soo's proposal, he believes that with a good negotiation between workers and employers, a more flexible system can be achieved without making dramatic changes.
He has proposed reducing the standard work week from 40 to 36 hours by cutting Friday afternoons without reducing wages. Kim's plan adds an extra hour per day from Monday to Thursday for a shorter Friday without reducing total hours and includes exemptions to the 52-hour cap for the semiconductor sector. And Lee Jun-seok, instead of a 4.5-day workweek proposal, has pledged labor reforms that include giving local governments the authority to adjust the minimum wage to revitalize regional economies. Though each candidate's visions differ, their focus on the economy underscores its central role in this election. 이수진, 아리랑 뉴스.
요새 쉬었음 청년들이 굉장히 사회 문제로 대두되고 있는데 그 부분에 대한 해결이 가장 먼저 이루어져야 될 거라고 생각합니다.
저는 일단 각자가 말하는 정책에 대해서 집중하고 그래도 5년이라는 길다면 길고 짧다면 짧은 시간 동안 본인이 말하는 거에 대해서 잘 지켜가는 정부가 되었으면 좋겠습니다.
기후와 관련해서는 조금 더 재생에너지나 뭐 이런 쪽에 조금 더 관심을 가지고 탈원전 정책에 조금 더 관심을 가지는 그런 정부가 되었으면 좋겠습니다.
대학 서열화를 끝내고 그리고 사교육 시장을 줄이는 방향으로 좀 더 평등한 교육 정책을 위해서 애써야 되지 않나 이런 생각을 갖고 있습니다.
누가 돼도 상관은 없지만 그 공약을 하셨더라면 하나라도 지켜주는 게 있었으면 좋겠어요. 아무래도 자영업 쪽에 있다 보니까 자영업자 쪽에 조금 더 신경을 써줬으면 좋을 것 같아요.
일단 기본적으로 주거 안정이 좀 제대로 이루어졌으면 하는 바람입니다.
없는 분들을 좀 생각해서 서로가 나눔의 실천을 했으면 좋겠어요.
아무래도 제가 이제 30대 초반이다 보니까 이제 결혼 이런 관련해서 정책들이 물론 지금도 잘 나오고 있는 것 같은데 아직도 청년들이 좀 결혼을 준비하는 데 있어서 어려움을 겪고 있기 때문에 결혼 문제에 있어서 좀 이제 정책 같은 것도 좀 더 많이 완화되고 대출 규제라든지 이런 것들 많이 좀 풀어졌으면 좋겠다라는 생각이 있습니다.
And that wraps up this noon edition of Arirang News special coverage of the 21st presidential election. Thank you for staying with us, and we'll return with the latest updates at 2 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.
학교 다니면서 작업을